5 years ago, I was left stranded on a lonely highway, abandoned by the man I married and the family I trusted. They laughed as I ran after their truck, my hands shaking, my heart breaking, but I survived. Now, the past has come looking for me, and the people who thought they could control my life are about to learn the hard truth. I am no longer the woman they left behind. I can still hear the echo of their laughter as the truck disappeared into the horizon. The tires tore up the dusty road, the sun beating down on my back, and my heart felt like it had plummeted into an endless pit. "Mason!" I shouted, sprinting after them, waving my hands as if that could stop the inevitable. "Mason!" But they just laughed louder. His brothers, Cole and Logan, leaned out the windows, phones in hand, recording the entire scene as though it were some ridiculous performance. "Good luck, Selene. See you in 300 miles. Logan yelled, his voice carried by the wind. I stood in the middle of that lonely gas station, one pump, a grimy restroom, and a vending machine selling stale snacks. Nothing else existed for miles. My phone had died just moments before. No charger, no wallet. I'd left them in the truck while grabbing Mason an energy drink. He had asked so politely, eyes half closed with exhaustion, and I had gone inside. And now gone. At first, I told myself it was a joke. Mason had pulled stunts before, stupid little tricks, but never like this. Not cruelly, not heartlessly. I perched on the curb, hands trembling, mouth dry. Every few minutes I stood, patrolled the lot, pretending the sun-scorched asphalt beneath me wasn't swallowing me whole. Then my phone buzzed, the last flicker of life in its battery. A single message. "Don't be mad, babe. Just a prank. We'll come back soon." I stared at it. No laugh escaped me. Hollow filled my chest. This wasn't a joke. This was Mason, the man I married, the one I had defended, cooked for, loved, thinking my terror was entertainment. Something shifted inside me then, slow and creeping, like realizing you've been sick for so long you forgot what healthy felt like. I looked around. One trucker, his rig filling up. The road stretched endlessly in both directions. No help. No solace. No returning truck. And I didn't want them to come back. For 5 years, I had tried to keep that family whole, every holiday dinner, every birthday, every sarcastic jab I swallowed. But no more. A woman pulled in a minivan, 2 kids asleep in the back. Her sweat-slicked face looked like she understood something unspoken. "I can take you as far as I can," she said. I nodded. Naomi. That was her name. She gave me snacks, a small charger, a $10 bill, and the simplest kindness I had felt in years. The bus station was 2 towns over. I messaged someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Aunt Eleanor. "Can I come stay with you for a while?" I typed, uncertainty clawing at my chest. Her reply came almost immediately. "Always come home." I bought a one-way ticket with the last of my hidden savings. As the bus roared down the highway, Selene Archer, the name I had never truly owned, started reclaiming herself. I wasn't returning. Not to Mason, not to their laughter, not to a life where my fear became entertainment. The first weeks at Eleanor's home were a slow exhale of everything I had been holding in. Her house smelled like lemon polish and fresh bread, corners worn but inviting. 2 days of uninterrupted sleep revealed the depth of my exhaustion, not from travel, but from years of pretense, of constant vigilance. I began working at a small diner near the ocean. Sticky menus, faded booths, and Mrs. Winslow, the kind owner, who paid cash at the end of each shift. The work was mundane, pouring coffee, refilling napkin holders, taking orders, but it grounded me. Nights on the back porch, sweet tea in hand, watching the sun dip beneath the horizon, I let my mind wander without fear. It was during one quiet Tuesday afternoon that the ordinary became extraordinary. The bell above the diner door jingled. A man stumbled in, soaked in blood, eyes wide with terror. "Help," he gasped before collapsing. I froze for a heartbeat. Then instinct took over. I checked his pulse, pressed a towel against the wound, whispered reassurances he might not hear but needed to feel. Mrs. Winslow called for an ambulance, her voice urgent but calm. The man, Adrian Cole grabbed my wrist before they took him, raspy voice barely audible.
"Thank you," he said.
I didn't expect to see him again. But days later, limping yet alive, he returned.
Coffee.
Questions. Silence punctuated by soft glances. No need for words, no games. Just presence. By autumn, Adrian was no longer a stranger. He was steady, quiet, protective, someone who existed in my world without demanding it be his. Yet his eyes sometimes held storms I could not reach, hints of danger and loss lurking behind each glance. One evening, a storm arrived. Rain pelted the porch and rattled the windows. I returned home to find Adrian sitting on Eleanor's steps, drenched, hands deep in his jacket pockets. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. I let him inside. The night passed in quiet tea and listening to the storm, revelations spilling like water. Adrian had been a detective, betrayed by a partner, shot, and left for dead. Life had demanded he vanish. I understood that instinctively. We didn't question each other's pasts. We simply existed, cautious but alive. Weeks passed. Safety settled over me like a blanket. Then, one afternoon, the front door stood open. Spare cash is missing. Fear pricked at my skin. Adrian was there in moments, calm yet alert. Someone was watching. My past had begun to reach toward me again, and for the first time, I felt the shadow of danger, not just from Mason, but from everything that had nearly consumed me. Selene's breathing slowed. The memory of Mason's betrayal lingered, but here, in Eleanor's house, with the waves breaking in the distance, I realized something profound. I had survived. I had chosen myself. And in Adrian, I found something steadier than love, a protector, an anchor, a shared silence that spoke louder than any words. But the past, as always, waits patiently. Days rolled into weeks, and my life at the diner settled into a quiet rhythm. Adrian's presence became a part of that rhythm without ever forcing itself upon me. He would show up without fanfare, sometimes to carry groceries for Eleanor, sometimes to help patch a loose board on the porch. He didn't need to speak to prove he was there. His reliability was its own quiet statement. I was safe, and someone was watching out for me. Evenings were my sanctuary. I'd sit on the back porch, cup of tea in hand, letting the sea breeze sweep away the tension I had carried for so long. Often, Adrian would sit beside me in silence, shoulders just barely brushing mine. I found comfort in that quiet, in the way he existed without taking or demanding. It was strange to feel so protected by someone whose past I barely knew, but trust is strange that way. It doesn't always announce itself. And then, one morning, the fragile bubble of safety I had built began to tremble. I had just finished wiping down the counter when the bell above the diner jingled. At first, I thought it was Adrian. He always arrived at the same time for coffee, but when I looked up, my stomach twisted in ways I hadn't felt since that lonely gas station years ago. It was Mason, the same man who had left me stranded miles from nowhere, who had laughed while his brothers recorded my humiliation, was standing there, tall, familiar, older, but unmistakably him. His eyes flicked to mine, hesitation mingling with a trace of shame I couldn't quite read. For a moment I froze. My hands clutched the rag I had been using to wipe tables. My mind raced, reconstructing every fear, every betrayal, every moment of panic I had endured since that day. I had imagined this meeting countless times over the years, but never like this, so real, so immediate, so inevitable. Before I could react, Adrian appeared behind me, calm and silent. He moved with that same quiet decisiveness that had kept me safe. Standing beside me now, he was more than a companion. He was a barrier. Mason blinked, momentarily caught off guard by Adrian's presence. I need to talk, Mason said, voice low, almost pleading. I didn't move.
I didn't respond.
I let Adrian's presence speak for me. Mason hesitated, as though realizing the gap between the man he had once been and the woman I had become was wider than he could cross. I know I don't deserve it, he continued. I just need to explain. The word explain made something inside me tighten. Explain what? How did he think leaving me there was funny? How did he let his brothers turn my fear into amusement? How did he watch me suffer and do nothing? Adrian didn't flinch. He just stood beside me, eyes sharp, unyielding. Mason's gaze shifted from mine to Adrian's, confusion flickering across his face. I started, then paused, realizing the only words I needed were the truth. He's my fiancé. The effect was immediate. Mason's shoulders slumped, realization dawning. There was no mockery, no pleading, just a quiet recognition that the life he had left behind had moved on without him. I stepped past Adrian, toward the door, refusing to give Mason any more power than necessary. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of rain and salt, and I felt the years of tension and fear slip slightly from my shoulders. Mason opened his mouth again, but I didn't wait to hear it. You didn't just lose me because of one prank, I said, voice steady despite the storm of memories inside me. You lost me because you never truly saw me. He looked down, shame flickering across his features. I could almost believe he regretted it, but that didn't matter anymore. I wasn't the woman he could manipulate with laughter or fear. I was Selene Archer, whole, careful, and cautious, yet free. Mason took a slow step back, like the weight of years had finally landed on him. I thought you'd come back, he muttered. I left because I needed to survive, I replied. I left because staying meant dying slowly. And I don't belong to you anymore. The words felt like a release, and for the first time in years, I truly meant it. Mason's lips parted, but no words came. He had nothing left to say. After he walked away, disappearing into the gray haze of the distant road, I turned back to Adrian. He met my gaze with calm reassurance, the quiet, steady presence I had grown to depend on. You okay? He asked. I am, I whispered, and for the first time, I believed it. The days after Mason's arrival passed in a strange mix of vigilance and relief. I realized that safety isn't the absence of fear, but the presence of someone who won't let you be harmed. Adrian became that presence in ways I hadn't anticipated. Weeks later, a sudden reminder of the dangers I had narrowly escaped arrived in the form of subtle, unnerving events. Doors slightly ajar, missing items, shadows in the peripheral vision. Adrian responded swiftly, installing new locks, cameras, and always remaining nearby without being intrusive. Eleanor, ever wise, offered a quiet observation one evening as we folded laundry. Sometimes, she said, the people we run from don't chase us because they want us back. They chase us because they've lost control. Her words settled deep into my bones. Mason, Cole, Logan, they existed somewhere out there. But my fear no longer ruled me. I had chosen myself. And in choosing myself, I had found Adrian, not perfect, not fully understood, but steadfast, unshakable, protective. And just as the waves crashed against the shore outside, relentless and unyielding, so too did life remind me that the past, however distant, was never fully gone. The first time I stepped into the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of dread and clarity. The marble floors gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, and the chatter of reporters outside the doors felt distant, like it belonged to someone else's life. I wasn't the scared woman left behind at a dusty gas station years ago. I was Selene Archer, steady, composed, and ready to face every shadow of the past. Adrian's hand was firm in mine, a quiet anchor as we navigated through the crowd. He didn't speak unless I needed him to. He didn't shield me unnecessarily. He simply existed, a constant presence I could trust, the opposite of every man who had ever used my vulnerability for amusement or power. Inside the courtroom, the tension was almost tangible. Cole, Logan, and Mason sat at the defense table, dressed in ill-fitting suits that did nothing to hide their unease. Gone was their swagger, the audacity that had fueled every cruel prank. The viral videos, the public outrage, the lawsuit, they had finally caught up to them. And for the first time, I saw them as they really were, small, desperate, scrambling to retain control over a life they had mocked for entertainment. Mason's eyes flicked toward me, lingering for just a second too long. The same man who had abandoned me, who had treated my fear like a joke, now seemed exposed, vulnerable in ways he had never been before. I didn't flinch. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. I had outgrown the fear he had wielded like a weapon. Selene Archer. The lawyer called, and I rose, heart steady despite the rush of adrenaline. Please state your experience for the court regarding the events leading to the lawsuit. I inhaled slowly. This was my moment, not for revenge, not for vindication, but for truth. The words I had rehearsed in the quiet hours of the night, the narrative I had built in my mind, flowed effortlessly. I spoke of the gas station, of the hours of waiting, of the fear and helplessness that had once been trivialized as a joke. I spoke of the pranks, the manipulation, the constant erosion of trust, and the way it had shaped me, not just in that moment, but over years of living with men who never saw me as more than a prop in their lives. The courtroom fell silent. Cole shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Logan avoided eye contact entirely. Mason sat stiff, his hands clasped tightly, as though holding onto the last remnants of control. For the first time, the scales were tipped. I wasn't the powerless one. After I finished, the lawyer guided me to a seat beside Adrian. He didn't need to tell me I was brave. The calm certainty in his eyes was affirmation enough. Mason's gaze lingered for a moment longer. Then he looked down, finally confronting the weight of the years he had lost, the consequences of his choices. Over the next days, the trial unfolded like a carefully orchestrated storm. Witnesses recounted events, evidence was presented, and the viral clips, the proof of their cruelty, played repeatedly on the screens. Cole and Logan attempted to minimize their actions, claiming it was just a joke, but the courtroom had no patience for excuses. Their laughter, their indifference, their past attempts to humiliate me, they had created a ripple of consequences far beyond their comprehension. Mason, caught between complicity and regret, remained mostly silent. I could see the cracks in his demeanor, the way guilt clawed at his expression. But Adrian never wavered. He was my anchor, my shield, my quiet strength, a reminder that I didn't need Mason's apology or understanding to survive. One afternoon, between hearings, I stepped out onto the courthouse steps for a breath of air. Adrian followed silently, placing his hand on my lower back. The wind tugged at my hair, carrying with it the scent of rain from a storm long past. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I am. I've never felt more myself." He smiled softly, and for a moment, the world beyond us, the flashing cameras, the whispers, the remnants of fear, seemed to vanish. It was just the two of us. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future where I wasn't haunted by the past. But even as I felt that calm, I knew the storm wasn't entirely over. Mason, Cole, and Logan had underestimated me. They had underestimated the strength it took to survive, to reclaim myself. And now, they were about to face it, publicly, irrevocably, in a courtroom that would no longer allow them to hide behind laughter and privilege. The first segment of Part 2 closed with that thought. Survival was no longer enough. I was ready for justice, and for the first time, I understood the full weight of my own power. The courtroom was tense, almost unbearably so. The air felt heavy, saturated with months of anticipation, whispered rumors, and the weight of public scrutiny. Cole and Logan sat rigidly, their once smug expressions replaced with thin masks of anxiety. Mason fidgeted, constantly shifting his gaze between the judge, the lawyers, and me. But I felt nothing but clarity. I had survived every trick, every manipulation, every moment of fear. Now it was their turn to face the consequences. The judge's gavel struck, echoing through the chamber. "Let us proceed." I rose when my lawyer requested. My hands didn't shake, my voice didn't falter. I recounted the gas station incident again, not just the viral video, but the terror, the helplessness, and the realization that I had been discarded like a joke. I spoke of the years of subtle cruelty, of how every prank chipped away at my self-worth. I told the truth of the emotional manipulation, the lies, and the quiet suffering that went unnoticed by everyone but me. Cole and Logan's lawyer tried to interrupt, tried to frame it as an exaggeration. But the evidence spoke louder than their words. Photos, messages, recordings, all meticulously compiled, showing the deliberate humiliation, the cruelty disguised as humor. Mason's silence was deafening. He couldn't escape the weight of complicity. Then came the moment I had been preparing for, the moment I realized would change everything. The viral prank that had once made them internet famous, the one they had thought was a harmless joke, was played again, this time in the courtroom. The video filled the giant screen. The gas station, the laughter, the cruel messages. I watched their reactions closely. Cole's jaw tightened. Logan avoided my gaze entirely. Mason looked stricken. And somewhere in that room, I felt the years of pain crystallize into a single, undeniable truth. I was no longer afraid. Selene Archer, the lawyer, said after the video ended, "How did this incident impact you?" I paused. I let the silence hang in the air, letting it carry the weight of everything I had endured. Then, in a calm, unwavering voice, I spoke. "It changed me," I said. "It made me realize that the people who are supposed to love you, to protect you, can sometimes hurt you the most. And it made me realize something else. If you don't protect yourself, no one will." I left. I walked away. And in doing so, I saved my life. A hush settled over the courtroom. Even the judge seemed to lean forward, absorbing every word. I felt Adrian's hands squeeze mine gently. That quiet presence reminded me that I wasn't alone. Not now, not ever again. The following days were a blur of testimonies, legal arguments, and the slow, deliberate exposure of Cole and Logan's years of manipulation and harassment. The evidence of their pranks, which had seemed harmless in their own eyes, revealed a pattern of cruelty and entitlement. They had made fun of fear, suffering, and vulnerability, and now they could not hide behind laughter. Mason finally spoke. His voice was low, almost broken. I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't mean for it to hurt her like that." I looked at him, saw the shadow of regret etched into his features, but I didn't offer forgiveness. I had no obligation to grant him absolution. I simply acknowledged the truth silently. He had failed, and he had learned too late. When the verdict came, it was decisive. Cole, Logan, and Mason were held accountable for their actions. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of shock, relief, and validation. But I didn't celebrate. I had wanted justice, yes, but more than that, I wanted closure, the freedom to step out of the past and reclaim my life. And finally, I could. Outside, the sun was warm on my face. The press swarmed, cameras flashing, microphones shoved forward, but I ignored them. Adrian's hand was steady in mine, grounding me as we walked down the courthouse steps together. I glanced back once. Cole, Logan, and Mason sat at the steps, defeated, stripped of the arrogance and control they had wielded for years. Kyle lingered at a distance, his eyes searching, as though he hoped for a reaction. I didn't give him one. The chapter with him had closed long ago. "You okay?" Adrian asked softly. I nodded, my heart full but calm. "I am. More than okay. I'm free." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You earned this." And in that moment, standing on the steps of a courthouse that had seen their downfall and my liberation, I realized something vital. Survival had been the first step. Reclaiming my life, embracing who I had become, and refusing to be defined by their cruelty. That was the true victory. As we walked away from the courthouse, hand in hand, the sun casting long shadows on the pavement, I knew that the worst part of the past was gone. I had survived the pranks, the betrayals, the fear. I had survived myself. And for the first time in my life, I was truly, unapologetically free. No one could abandon me again. No one could dictate my worth. And Adrian? He was more than a protector. He was a partner, a companion, and a quiet reminder that life could be both safe and full of love. The wind carried a gentle promise as we stepped into the street, leaving behind the echoes of cruelty, the laughter that had haunted me, and the ghosts of a life I no longer belonged to. Ahead of me stretched possibility, and for the first time, I walked forward with certainty, strength, and the knowledge that I had truly found myself. The past was behind me. The future, bright and unknown, waited. And for Selene Archer, that was enough.